that session was awesome for me, so I appreciate you guys playing and helping us kind of evolve that process and simplify it. So that was amazing. Thank you. That was great. All right, so next thing. So now we focus on the one thing, right? So this is Mr. Miyagi. So we just did some waxing of the fence, or some waxing of the cars. We waxed cars, right? So now we're going to start painting some fences. We're going to shift over to a concept called the Epiphany Bridge. Those of you guys who are in the inner circle, we've talked about this individually, each of your groups, I think. But every time I talked about it, like it evolved and changed and tweaked, and so I'm going to kind of retell some of it just to kind of get you guys back into that mode because it is big. So if you look at story, this is coming back to the story process. So earlier today, I'm trying to think of how many Epiphany bridges I used today. One of them, I started talking about the big domino. Do you guys remember I started talking about, okay, there's this concept called the big domino. Let me tell you a story. And what did I do? I flipped back, and then I told you guys the story of how I had the epiphany to focus on the one thing from Tim Ferriss, right? And I told this huge story that eventually got us to this logical thing that we had to go through. But like I sold it to you guys emotionally first, right? I told the story about Tim Ferriss and how he sold this thing, and then we go through everything. And so that's kind of the process. So the first time I ever like got this concept, Dagan Smith was actually the one. Did any of you guys know Dagan? Like, oh, so sad. Dagan messaged me, by the way, this week, and he's like, I'm back. Like, so he's like creating this, anyway, so he's one of my favorite people in this whole world. He was a wrestler, he became an internet marketer, so we kind of connected through that. We did a couple events together and a bunch of cool stuff, and then like 2 or 3 years ago, he just like disappeared. I think that after 3 years, like so he's coming back. He's awesome, but a really deep thinker about this stuff. He was the first one that kind of started getting me thinking about this, about belief patterns, and helping people. Like if you can get people to believe something, like everything else just disappears. And like how do you craft things and structure stories in a way to cause belief? And he was the first one that really helped me understand this epiphany concept too. It was like, how do we give people epiphanies? Like that's the secret. Like, and so. He talked about it a couple years ago, and I kind of forgot about it. And the first time that I remembered it was about 6 or 7 weeks ago. I got asked to go speak at the Prove It event. Anyone here into Prove It? So he gives me a smirk, like, kind of. Anyway, so this is a product that puts your body in ketosis. When you drink it, it puts beta-hydroxybutyrate salts into your body, which then, in theory, makes your body, instead of burning glucose, you start burning ketones instead. How many of you guys got fired up by what I just said? Like 2 people. Everyone else is like, right? Okay, so this is a company I built a funnel for. We got equity in the company for doing that, and so we kind of help these guys out with things along the line. And so a couple months ago, they wanted me to come and speak at one of their events. So I didn't know much about it other than I was already speaking another event the same weekend. So I fly out to go speak. Brandon was with me. We were hanging out, and I think Brandon filmed the whole thing. So maybe we'll someday show all the behind-the-scenes footage of this horrible experience that happened. But we get there, we're up in the hotel room, and I meet Brian, who's the owner of the company, and I was like, hey, man. He's like, thanks for coming. I'm glad you're going to be speaking. And he's like, we're actually going to speak to the leadership groups, so the 150 people who make the most money in the company. You have a chance to speak to them. I'm like, cool. What do you want me to talk about? He's like, whatever you want. I was like, well, how long do I have? He's like, as long as you want. I'm like, okay, like, well, give me some like, what do you want? And he's just like, whatever you think would be good is fine. And then, and I'm like, well, when does it start? And he's like, oh, crap, it started 10 minutes ago. I'm like, what? He's like, we got to go. And so we like jump in a hotel room, we're running down, we come in this room, and there's 150 people sitting in this room. And, and I'm like, what in the world? And I'm like, seriously, like, what should I talk about? I'm like time. He's like, whatever you want, as long as you want. And then he leaves me, walks to the front of the room, and starts talking to the group, and then he introduces me. And so I'm literally like walking down the aisleway, like everyone's, on the side, so I'm walking down, they're clapping and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have no preparation. And then I turn around, I look out into this audience, and I look at everybody, and it was almost like a flash of lightning. Like I had this thought, and I'm grateful for that thought. Thank you from wherever it came from. But I had this thought, and it was the first time I had ever kind of sketched this concept out for everybody. And I sat down and I told everyone, I said, look, you guys are all network marketers here in this room, not you guys, but them. I'm like, here's network marketers. I was like, how many of you guys love this product? And they're all like, oh, I'm looking at them all, they're all cheering, and their t-shirts say like, glucose is greater than, or ketones is greater than glucose, and like these weird shirts, all this stuff, and they're all jumping up and down, and they've got, all this stuff. Like they totally drank in the Kool-Aid, literally, right? And they're in this thing partying. And I was like, you know what the biggest problem is with network marketers as a whole? Not just you guys, but everybody as a whole. I said, what happens is that something, like this is you, right? And you're just this normal person having a good time in life and you're happy and it's kind of like the Matrix thing, right? Like you think everything's fine, and all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and they offer you like the red pill or the green pill, right? And something happened, right? And you had something that happened that caused an epiphany, which I found out is a really hard word to spell. I've spelled it wrong so many times ever since this. And so you had this epiphany about something, right? And so for you guys, like you had this thing and somebody gave you this magic powder and they told you some story and you drank it and you're like, this is like drinking candy. You have this epiphany and you're in, right? And then the worst thing possible happens. You have this epiphany, you come over here on this side of the bridge and you hang out over here and all of a sudden, I'm gonna put glasses on here. So what happens is you geek out, right? You're like, this is so cool. And you start geeking out about it, right? How many of you guys geeked out about something, right? You start geeking out about it. You start studying. You start learning. Also, you figure out why this tasted good. And then the actual science. And you start logically justifying your decision, right? And what happens is you start learning all of these magic words. One of my friends wrote a book. Her name's Kim Claver. It's called, If My Product's So Good, How Come Nobody's Buying It? And one of her chapters was called Technobabble. And she says the problem is that we go on this process, come over here, and we start geeking out, we start learning about ketones and beta-hydroxybutyrate salts and all these things, and you're like so excited because this stuff's so fascinating to you and you're loving it, and you go to the events and they got these doctors up there on stage talking about all the clinical trials and results and all sorts of stuff, right? And you're so excited, you've geeked out, and all of a sudden like this little prospect comes out and he's all excited, you see him, and it's like this little thing, and you're like, oh, my little prospect, and all of a sudden you start spewing all your technobabble on this person, blah, and the person's like, and then they run away, right? How many of you guys have been spewed technobabble by a network marketer in your life, okay? You've experienced that, right? And that's why technobabble, that's why network marketing is such a bad rep, is because of this, right? Is that you in your logical space try to pitch people on why you were logically sold. And as you know, that's not how you bought. Nobody on earth ever got pitched on ketones by the fact that there's beta-hydroxybutyrate salts in there. Nobody ever once bought because of that. Right? And so I was like, told everyone in the group, I said, you've got to go back in time and figure out like what was the thing that gave you the epiphany that emotionally sold you on this thing. And you got to remember that story, because that story is the key to unlocking everything. And when you remember what that story is, and you remember how you had your epiphany, when you meet people, that's the key, that's the secret. Is you tell your story about how you had your epiphany, and if you do that correctly through the process we're going to show you here, then that person will have the same epiphany you just had. Okay, it comes back to we opened this session with the whole inception thing, right? I'll reread this. So what I found in something, that if you just tell somebody something, then it's not as strong. If I tell you like all this cool stuff here, it's not very strong. Okay? It doesn't get the emotion that we need to really cause action. I think that to really make a concept go viral and get people's buy-in, we have to lead them somewhere, but we can't give them the answer. They have to come up with the epiphany. The cool thing is when I tell someone about my epiphany, 99% of the time they have the same epiphany, if you tell the story right? And then they come up with it. We plant it in their minds with the story, and if they come up with the answer, then they've sold themselves. Marcus Simonis, right? Does every business need a funnel? We need you on the show. Okay? Wait, so you're saying that this stuff tastes good and I lose weight? I'm in, right? Funnel. So you're saying I need a funnel? Like whatever your business is, you got to think through that thing. So what I want you guys thinking through right now, we're going to talk about all the different stories and things like that in your business. And actually, probably after lunch, we're going to build a big inventory list of Epiphany Bridge stories that you can use in your marketing and your funnels and your webinars and everything like that. But I want you thinking about this, like when it comes to your one thing. So this exercise is going to be tied to your one thing, right? So there's a reason why you got into your spiritual healing. There's a reason why you got into taxes. There's a reason why you got into weight loss and nutrition. There's a reason why each one of you guys got into what you did. And it's not the technobabble that you probably convince people of, right? There's a story, right? Can you guys all think to what your story is of what got you into what it is that you're excited by? Okay, something happened. And so we've got to get away from this, because this is where most of us are selling from, which is why we're suffering from low conversion rates and all sorts of people not showing up for our webinars. And all the problems you guys are having is because of this. So if we can reverse back and remember back, like what got you passionate about this, like that's the key. Okay? And so again, for this exercise, we're going to tie this to the one thing. The one thing. But again, after lunch, we're going to be doing Epiphany Bridges for a lot of other things as well, because it's not Yeah, I mean, each secret in the webinar will have an epiphany bridge. So we're using these over and over again. But for this exercise, I want you to think about that for your one thing that we talked about earlier this morning. Okay? All right, so that's step number one. Any questions about the epiphany bridge right there? All right, cool. Okay, so the next thing here is this is the epiphany bridge script. So when I was on the airplane for 56 hours, I started sketching out a list of all of the epiphany bridges stories I could think of that I use consistently. And what's cool is like I have one tied to almost every false belief that I think my customers have. I got a bunch of like just a good example of one. Some of you guys probably heard me use this before, but in my webinars when I'm trying to justify the fact that people need to make an investment, 'cause a lot of people think like, oh, well, like, this stuff's so good, you should give it to me for free, right? How many of your customers have ever said that? Give it to me for free, and if it's really good, then I'll try it afterwards. And so I have an epiphany bridge story that I always tell in a lot of my webinars to get rid of that. If I tell the story ahead of time, it dissolves the concern before it ever happens. And so the story that I use for that is I wrestled. Okay, here we come. Backstory, okay? So I wrestled at BYU. Some of you guys may know that. And my wrestling coach when I was at BYU was a guy named Mark Schultz. Anyone here ever heard of Mark Schultz? Ever here seen the movie Foxcatcher? So that was my coach in the movie. His brother was the one that John DuPont murdered in the movie. And then Chatham Tate, how do you say that guy's name? Yes, he played my coach in the movie. So that's Mark Schultz, right? If you see him, he's about this tall, strongest man on earth, literally could rip anyone apart with his bare hands. Olympic gold medalist, one of the best athletes our country's ever produced. And the guy's amazing, right? So he was my coach at BYU. So first day I go down there and I meet him. I'm super intimidated because I'm like, this dude's Olympic gold medalist, like, one of those people like you're in a room, you shake his hand, you're like, this guy could kill me with his bare hands if he wanted to, like no doubt, right? So I have this thing, right? So this is my backstory. I hang out with Mark, and then about a week into my training, I'm kind of like stagnant. Like going from high school to college is hard, like really, really painful. So I'm getting to college wrestling, and I've got like the worst guys on the team are just beating me like I'm a little girl. Like I was a good high school wrestler. I was a state champion. I was an All-American. I took second place in the country. So I was one of the best wrestlers in the country going into college. And like the worst guys in college were just beating me. And it was like frustrating and like humiliating and hard to go from like, imagine like you being the best in the world at something and all of a sudden a day later you realize that you're the worst in the room. Like that's hard. There's like a lot of pain and stress that goes into that, right? And I remember just being like depressed. And then one night I was sitting in my dorm room kind of depressed and I heard this knock on the door. And I go and I open the door, and it's Coach Schultz, and he's standing there like a black jacket, just looking like the toughest guy on earth. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mark Schultz is at my door. I'm like, hey, Coach, what's going on? He's like, he comes on in, and did I do internal, external? Yes, I did. Okay. And so then Mark came to me, and he had a VHS tape right here, and on the front of the tape, it was written in magic marker. It said "Total Violence." And he came to me and said, hey, Russell, this is a tape of me wrestling. It's all my matches where I beat everybody up. He's like, the match where I broke the guy's arm at the Tbilisi tournament's in there, the one where the world championship, the gold, like all my best matches are on this tape. He's like, I want you to watch this tape every single night and just study how I wrestle, and you will become a better wrestler. I was like, all right, thanks, man. That's awesome. And he's like, hey, Russell, go get your wallet. I'm like, why? He's like, go get your wallet. I'm like, okay, man. So I walk over, and I grab my wallet and I hand it to him. And he takes my wallet and he opens it up, takes all the cash out, puts it in his pocket, hands back the wallet. And I was like, Coach, what are you doing? And he's like, Russell, I'm going to teach you something right now that'll serve you for the rest of your life. He's like, if I just gave you this tape and I left, you put it on your shelf and you would never watch it. He's like, now you've made a financial investment. Literally, every penny I had to that point. He's like, now you're going to watch this video every single day, and because you've invested financially, and so because of that, you will become a better wrestler. And he handed my wallet back, and he walked out the door. He shut the door, and just like that, I decided that I should watch the DVD, and I did over and over and over again. And because of that, I actually did become a better wrestler. And I learned that from Mark, and I'm grateful to this day because I learned that. If I wouldn't have invested something, I wouldn't have been successful. People who don't pay attention. And that's why I have to ask for an investment today because blah, 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 right? Boom. So the Epiphany Bridge, now like you're like an idiot. If you're like, can I get it for free? Like, seriously? Mark Schultz stole all my money and I felt good about it at the end, right? Okay. So that was like one thing. So after lunch, we're going to actually do an inventory. We're going to find false belief patterns your people have and then stories you can bridge with it. So we'll get deeper into that. But I want to kind of just illustrate, like that's kind of the path, right? And so I wrote out all these stories on the flight home, as many as I could think of, and there more keep popping in like as I'm doing it. And so it's kind of fun. But I started retelling those stories in my head, and I was trying to think, like, and not all of them do I do this perfectly for, but for the most part, there was a very consistent pattern to how I told these stories and a bunch of things. And there's like kind of the hierarchy of how we tell a story, and then after lunch we're going to talk about how to get like the emotional impact from a story, because those are two different things. But right now we're talking about just the structure of the story, okay? So I'm going to break this down, kind of go through this, so you'll see it, okay? So the first thing is every good story starts with a backstory, okay? If you've watched me over the last 2 days, and if you watched me speak at all, you notice that I will start a concept, and like, let me tell you a story about this, and I step back, and I actually physically step back. Like I talked about the one domino today, if you notice, and I stepped over. Let me tell you guys a backstory. And I physically like walk back here because, anyway, there's a whole bunch of cool Ninja NLP things with timelines and how I walk across the stage that some of you guys might notice, but there's things tied to that, right? But if you notice when I'm doing stuff, it gets tied to these storylines, right? So I'll talk about a concept over here. I'll go, okay, now I'm talking about the backstory, and I'll start over here. Okay, so that's if you're physically in front of an audience. If not, you can just do it through talking as well. So I start with the backstory, right? And the backstory, the goal of the backstory is to figure out like, where's my prospective customer? Where are they at right now? Okay. When we talk about the attractive character, I talk a lot about like the importance of a backstory, because most of us, like, if you are in this position now where you're an expert, you have gone through a process and a path, and you are up here, and you are the epitome of success, right? Like people wanted to get where you're at. The problem is that while you're up here hanging out in the rafters, like on your high horse, everyone looks at you and there's like it's like, man, that guy, he's succeeded, but he's up there, right? And there's this disconnect. And one of the biggest things with selling is rapport. Like, how do we build rapport? We need to get rapport people. So the first thing you got to do is you got to get off your high horse, because people, they want to get up here, but they're not going to come up here unless you get down here, come back over here and explain, hey, that's where we're going, but I've been here before, and I want to explain how that happened. So we start this backstory, and I'm going to start taking them, like physically taking them on a journey with me. Okay, so I'm stepping back to where they're probably at right now in their journey. Okay, that's the key to understand. This is where they're at, so let me get off where I'm at, and I got to remember where I'm at, and we're coming over here. Okay, and it's part of this whole journey too. All right, so we start with the backstory. Now, the backstory is all leading to some type of incident, like something happened, right, where you got stuck. Okay, so you're going through this process, and the backstory is happening. All of a sudden, boom, you hit this wall, and this wall is internal conflict, right? By the way, if you look at movies, this is the same, very similar path to what he teaches in the Hero's Two Journeys as well. I talked about earlier, like this is the same hero's journey. So you hit a wall, you hit this problem. Okay, it's an insurmountable wall. There's no way you can get over it. Now, if you want to move from like being a good storyteller to a great storyteller, most people, when they talk about a problem, they talk about the external problem. So they're like, yeah, like I needed more cash, I needed more money, or I wanted to lose weight, and they talk about the external problem, right? And so what you do, you have to identify the external problem, because that's like what people will admit to you, right? Like when I meet people and they're like, yeah, I want to start a business. Like, why? Well, I want to make some money. Okay, that's an external reason, right? And so the second thing you got to figure out is like, what are the internal reasons? Because nobody started a business just because they want to start a business or just because they want money. Like that's not the reason why people start businesses. It's not the reason why people lose weight. Like I'm buying this program because I want to lose weight. That's the external reason why they bought it, and it's surface level. And if you sell the surface level, you will always struggle. So you got to figure out. And the best exercise to do is if you have someone physically you're talking to, is to ask them why like 15 times. So, okay, well, why do you want to lose weight? Well, because I want to feel better. Okay, well, why do you want to feel better? Well, because I want more energy during the day. Okay, well, why do you want more energy during the day? Well, because like I hate when I go home at night and I'm tired. Well, why does that even matter? Well, the reality is I've got 5 little kids at home, and I get home and they're so excited, there's so much energy, and like I just want to like when I get home be able to put the same energy into them as I do during my work day. Like, well, why do you want to do that? Well, I want my kids to love me. Well, why does that matter? Well, I don't want to be that guy who's always at work all day. Right? And I start getting now into the internal, right? Why do you want to start a business? Well, I want to make money. Why do I want to make money? Well, I want to make money because I want to be successful. Why do I want to be successful? Well, we keep digging deeper and deeper. Eventually you'll find out like they want to be successful because their wife doesn't like them, or because their kids don't like them, or because when they're growing up, their parents, like whatever that is, like there's a reason why they want to have that thing, right? And you got to get to the reason, okay? If you look at the way most people sell, they sell to the external. And you need to identify the external, but you've got to sell to the internal. You got to talk about the reason, like the real reason why. And so I'd even come back on your own journey and how you had your epiphany and really get to what it was that, the reason why you did it, because the majority of the time it's the same for almost everyone. It comes down to we want to feel love, we want to feel connection with somebody or something. There's internal things. And so you hit this wall, and the wall you're talking about the internal problems, I need money, but like, man, I want respect for my dad or my mom or my kids or my whatever that is, right? So we talk about those things, okay? And that's going to make this an emotional connection. It's like, wow, that's, because if you're talking about the same internal and external problems that you experienced, it's the same that they had, boom, instant rapport. That's where they bond with you, right? Okay, so there's the wall. Now something happens that gets you over that wall. You have some kind of epiphany, or you hear some kind of story, or you watch it, or something happens that causes this epiphany, right? And that's the next piece in the story. So for me, the epiphany, Mark Schultz comes to my house, knocks on the door, takes my money, explains something, and I had this epiphany, right? Wow, like those who don't pay attention. That's the epiphany I have, right? Whatever that thing is. So they talk about the epiphany, okay? And again, the key to the epiphany is like when you tell that part of it, that's what hopefully would give people the exact same epiphany, okay? So you tell the epiphany, I had this epiphany, which is really, really cool, right? But an epiphany in and of itself is kind of, okay, that's a cool idea. It's the actual now fulfillment of that epiphany that'll get the complete buy-in. So then we transition from epiphany, okay, so based on this, Mark told me I needed to watch this every single day and I had to pay for it or else it wasn't gonna work. Okay, so I made a game plan, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna watch it every single night for the next 6 weeks and see what happens. This is the game plan I have. And then a big piece of this, and you see this especially in movies really, really well, is that you have to show like what happens if this doesn't work, right? Like in every single movie, I can't remember what page in the script. If you listen to the hero's two journeys, you'll hear it. But there's this time where like everything's happening. All of a sudden, the hero's got this spot where it's like, I'm either going to do it or I'm not going to do it. Every movie's got that, and it's like, if I do it, then like this. If I don't, then I'm stepping. There's that pivotal moment. And so here, I got to explain to people like I figured it out. I got this plan, so I'm going to do. But if it doesn't work, like because they're going through that same fear. Like if it doesn't work, what happens? So I want to try to paint the picture of failure. Like I'm freaking out because if this doesn't work, I just spent the last $50 I had. I just, I've tried all these other weight loss plans. If it doesn't work, and my status is going to be decreased. What are those things like? Like what does it look like if it doesn't work? And then you went through and said, okay, screw that. I don't care about how much pain this is going to be. I'm just going to try it. You do the process. You have the result. Boom. And so that is the story of how, or that's kind of the process of the Epiphany Bridge script. Does that make sense, you guys? Okay, and so every story will kind of follow us. Again, sometimes I lean heavier on one thing and others. Sometimes I don't. But as a template and a process, most of my stories will fit into this thing. Like I said, sometimes I might not paint the picture of failure. I might miss the internal extra or something, but as a whole, this is a pretty consistent pattern for almost every story I was able to go through as I was kind of going through this. Yeah.
There's also on the painting a picture of failure. Are you painting a picture of failure that you do not basically come on board, or are you painting a picture of failure as like here's things where you may fail in 1 week, kind of like alleviate it?
It's kind of like here's the plan, right? So here's the plan. I've got two things I can do. I can go and follow this plan, or like what if I don't, or if the plan doesn't work, or whatever that kind of is. So it's a failure of either like of inaction or failure of like, maybe this thing's not going to work, right? Maybe I switch my diet and it still doesn't work, and so it could be either of those, either the failure of inaction or failure of what if the plan doesn't work? Because there's always that fear, like what if I buy this thing and it doesn't work? Like, okay, well what's the worst case scenario? Okay, cool, I'm going to do it anyway, and boom, you start moving on. Yeah.
So how deep do you get this? Because I think you've talked about before, and I've heard it before, like people are more motivated by the fear of whatever that fear is. And if you ask the question enough times, you get to like the core fears. And I know from something I did personally, like some consulting I did or received, like there's 5 core motivators that if you get deep enough to the why, it's usually extinction, like fear of death, mutilation, loss of autonomy, separation, or the fear of abandonment, and then what they call ego death, which is like humiliation or shame. So how deep do you go when you kind of paint that picture?
It depends on, sometimes I'm telling a story in like 1 minute in a Facebook Live, sometimes I'm telling it in 15 minutes in in a webinar. It kind of depends on the time allotment, you know what I mean, that you have. Which that's what's nice about this too, is like you can go fast or you can go, and I'm going to talk after lunch about the depth, because there's depth of like how far you go, but depth of like how you make people feel as well. And the more layers you're able to add in, the better. That's why like a 2-hour, or 3-hour, 4-hour video is way more emotionally impactful typically than like a 15-minute film, because, you know, which is why one reason I like webinars so much, because you can get people into a new environment and you've got longer to tell the stories and have the emotional impact. Whereas with video sales or other things, it's shorter, so you know, in a perfect world, one interesting thing, like the more time someone spends with you, the more money they're more likely to spend with you, right? That's why we do events for 3 days to try to sell big ticket things, because it's like they have 3 days to build rapport with you. You know, you can tell stories deeper. So, yeah, the most you're able to do in the time allotted, it's probably the best way to do it. Yeah.
So you said epiphany.
Yeah. So my epiphany bridge in ClickFunnels. If you've watched the webinar, it's and I tell multiple actually. So the first one is my potato gun thing. So I'm like, I didn't know what a funnel was at all. And so at the time, I had this little website. I was selling potato guns. And I had this website. I was doing it. First, I was buying ads on Google. I was spending $2. I was spending $10 a day on Google ads. I was making $30. And my wife and I were rich in college. It was amazing. And then, like, everyone found out about the internet, and ad costs went up, and competition went up. And soon, the same website I had where I was spending $10, making $30. Now I was spending $10, and I only make a sell every day. You know, I'd have to spend $300 or $400 to make a $30 sell, and it didn't work anymore. And then one day, one of my friends called me up, and so there's my wall, right? And the thing that sucked is then I couldn't make any money. Like, my wife was working at the time, so I'm just moving into the internal. So my wife was working at the time. She was supporting me. This little business was supposed to be her way out, but now she couldn't, so she was still working. I was making no money now. And as a man, I'm like, that's embarrassing. Like, as my brand new wife, and she's supporting me while I'm trying to like start my internet business. Like, it was humiliating. It was really, really hard, right? And then I had this phone call from my friend. This is a true story, by the way. Mike Filson called me up and was like, hey, Russell, I figured out this cool new thing. He's like, you know, all your little websites, like your potato gun one and this one and that one. He's like, I went to all my websites, I added these little upsells, OTOs, and I added this. And he said, usually my upsell is about 3 times as expensive as my first product. He says, right now, 1 out of 3 people are buying that. He's like, I doubled my income. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that's what happened? So I went back, and my plan was I'm going to go back to all my little websites and add these upsells. So I went and added a potato gun upsell. We started selling potato gun kits, 3 times the price of the first one. And that was the plan. And see, in this one, I don't go into paint the picture of failure at all in this one. I said, okay, cool. So I did that, added it, and sure enough, just like he said, 1 out of 3 people buying the second one. That doubled how much money I was making. So now I was putting $10 into Google Ads a day, and I was back making $50, $60 a day. And that's where I discovered a funnel. Boom. So Epiphany Bridge. Now they're like, whoa, I need a funnel, you know? Boom. And then like I do another Epiphany Bridge afterwards where I transition over to like the Nourish cell, right? I have an epiphany of like, here's the hard way we did it, and here's how we do it now using ClickFunnels. And then there's epiphany, yeah. So like, I'll show you more tomorrow, but and inside the secret, there's epiphany inside of each secret. And so we're using them over, like everything I'm trying to get somebody to believe, I'm wrapping an epiphany bridge around.
The epiphany bridge.
Yeah, we'll do that after lunch. So after lunch, yeah, yes. Yeah. We gotta get one done first, and we'll focus on a whole bunch of them. Okay, all right, so the next screen, what I wanna do. So what I'm gonna do is this will be the last thing we do before lunch today, is I want you guys to write an epiphany bridge about the epiphany you had to your one thing, okay? So the one thing we talked about this morning, somewhere along your lifetime, something happened that got you to believe that thing, okay? That domino knocked down for you, and that's why you bought all in, and that's why you're the guru of that thing now. So whatever your one thing is, I want you to remember what was the story that happened that got you into that, and I want you to sketch it out. And I've got kind of a script. Did you have a question before that?
And it has to be me, it can't be a client story, or it's best to be?
It's best to be you. Yeah, at least for this exercise. There's times you can do other ones, but there's a reason why you got into this, right? This is the story I want to know right now. It's why you got into this thing. And this is not, this story over the next 5 or 6 hours, we're going to go deeper and deeper and turn this into like an actual story, and a bunch of you guys are going to actually share them. Right now, I don't want a huge emotional story. I want you just to write out the events in order. So here's an example. So basically, you can write out these as bullet points. So the first question is, what is your backstory and what did you want? Okay? Second question, what was the problem you encountered and how did it make you feel? So that's the wall. What was the external struggle? What was the internal struggle? Number 5, what was the epiphany that you had? Number 6, what plan did you come up with after the epiphany? What would happen if you failed? How did you take action on the plan? And what was the end result you experienced? Okay? So if I was to write this really quick, and again, we're going to get into the emotional side of storytelling. That's not what we're talking about right now. Right now we're just saying, okay, the backstory is that I had a little website selling potato guns, and it was supporting my wife and I through college. What was the problem? Google would increase their prices, and after that, I was no longer able to be profitable. External struggle. I didn't have any money to buy stupid things. Internal struggle. My wife had to stay at work. I was a failure as a husband. The epiphany I had, if I had an upsell to my product, it would double how much money I made with no extra effort. What was the plan? I was going to go add upsells to all my products. What would happen if you failed? If I failed, I'd still be a failure in my wife's eyes, maybe, and I wouldn't make any extra money, and that would suck. How to take action on the plan? I added upsells to all of my things. What was the end result that happened? I 3x how much money I made from every single thing, and now we were back in business, and I was making money with my little funnel. And let's spend 10 or 15 minutes writing that out, and then we'll come back.